The Pope is about to spill some secrets. He's going to open up the Vatican secret archives, those legendary storehouses of conspiracy and cover-up. What could be hiding inside? The Vatican is one of the smallest countries in the world, but it might also be the most secretive. It's cloistered off from the rest of Italy inside its own city walls. You can't just wander around whenever you want. If you do, you have to follow a strict code of conduct. Dress conservatively, no photography allowed, and non-Catholics need a special permit just to enter. And even once you're inside, you still unsee everything, because there are whole wings of the Vatican reserved for the highest ranking members of the Catholic Church, including the Pope himself. The average tourist won't get access to them until sometime between 2025 and 2080, depending on who you ask. These are the Vatican secret archives. Now, the Vatican isn't exactly tight-lipped about these archive rooms. They're more like storage facilities than secret bases. But it's what's inside them that's off-limits, which brings us back to that original question: what's in there? Well, if you ask the Church, they'll tell you it's pretty much just mundane paperwork. Tax records, diplomatic correspondence, things like that. But if you ask historians and conspiracy theorists, they'll tell you the Church is definitely hiding something. Whether it's evidence of Jesus' brother or proof that Mary Magdalene was his wife, artifacts related to the Holy Grail, or, and this is popular records of alien contact. There's no shortage of theories out there about what the Vatican might be hiding, but how much truth is there to any of them? Well, let's start off with the more mundane stuff: the tax records, diplomatic correspondence, basic legal documents. And the reason the Church keeps these things a secret isn't really that scandalous. Back when the Vatican first started keeping these records, Italy wasn't a country yet. The Papal States were basically an independent country within a country. So, if the Pope needed to send a letter to another sovereign head of state, he had to make sure it didn't fall into the hands of that country's rival. And to make sure that didn't happen, the letters were coded and kept secret until they reached the intended recipient. That practice stuck around even after Italy unified in 1861 and the papacy became a part of the country. The Church still wanted to keep its communications secure, especially during World War I, when Italian soldiers fought against Austria-Hungary. Then again in World War II, when Italy fought alongside Germany. But why keep those old codes around after the war? Well, in part because the Vatican doesn't trust the Italian government. After all, it was the Italian government that cut the Pope's power in half by taking away his temporal rule over central Italy. But the Vatican's distrust of the Italian government is nothing compared to its distrust of the Ottoman Empire. Which is why the Church went to such great lengths to keep secret the fact that Ottoman Sultan Mehmed, the Conqueror, had predicted the start of the Crusades, at least according to Venetian merchant and chronicler of the Crusades, Moreno. In his journal, Sanudo wrote down a conversation he had with a man named Niccolo di Nicolai, who claimed to have met Muhammad while traveling in the Middle East. Muhammad told Niccolo that in his dreams, God commanded him to seize Jerusalem from the infidels. And when Muhammad woke from his dream, he assumed God meant it literally, so he sent his men to conquer the city. This conversation, if true, would lend credence to the idea that the Crusades were a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. But it would also mean that the Catholic Church had known about the impending doom of the Holy Land well before Muhammad conquered it. Not exactly something they'd want their flock to know. But regardless of whether or not Muhammad really had a premonition about conquering Jerusalem, the Crusades did happen, and the Church did record why. Historian Thomas Asbridge describes those records as the principal sources for the Crusades. Unfortunately, those records are hidden away in the Vatican secret archives. They include letters, papal bulls, records of the military orders, trial records, and even a diary kept by one of Richard the Lionheart's knights. They contain the official church accounts of why the Crusades were launched, how they were financed, and who led them. This documentation may help answer lingering questions about the Church's role in starting the Crusades and its relationship with the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But it will also reveal internal disputes between the secular and regular clergy over how to run the kingdom. Says historian Christopher Kelly, "We don't know much about how ordinary Catholics viewed the Crusades, but we do know that high-ranking members of the Church had mixed feelings about them. Some saw the Holy War as a way to expand Christianity in the Middle East. Others felt it was too violent and would hurt the Church's reputation. Still others believed the timing was wrong and the Church should focus on other issues first. If the Vatican archives have their way, we might never know who said what or when. And the Crusades aren't the only event the Vatican wants to keep under wraps. There are also the records relating to the Reformation. The movement to reform the Catholic Church that started in the 16th century and ultimately resulted in Protestantism. Those records contain documents showing how deep and widespread the discontent was within the Church, and how close it came to completely changing Christianity forever. But the Church does unwant to let go of them, because it would be admitting that it made a mistake. Historian John O'Meara explains that the Catholic Church sees itself as the one true church founded by Jesus Christ. Therefore, it cannot admit that anything within it could have been wrong. That's why the Church is so adamant about keeping its records secret. They show that the Church wasn't perfect, that its leaders made mistakes, and that they weren't above questioning the status quo. It also shows that the Church was involved in some really bad stuff, like the 1291 massacre of the Knights Templar, when French soldiers murdered almost every last member of this once mighty holy order. And it doesn't stop there. There are also records of the Spanish Inquisition, when the Church targeted Jews and Muslims living in Spain, forcing them to convert to Christianity or face execution. There are records of the Salem witch trials, when the Church targeted people accused of witchcraft, resulting in the executions of more than 20 innocent men and women. And there are records of the Church's involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, when the Church transported more than 3 million Africans across the Atlantic Ocean, selling them into slavery in the Americas. All of these events are dark chapters in the history of the Church, but they're also necessary to understand if you want to understand the Church today. Unfortunately, if the Vatican has its way, we may never know the full story behind any of them. The Vatican may not want to release these records, but that doesn't mean they'll stay secret forever. As time goes on, more and more of them are being digitized and made available online. Soon enough, anyone with an internet connection will be able to read them. And once that happens, the Vatican's grip on the past will finally be broken. So do you think there's anything the Vatican would truly rather keep secret? Let us know in the comments, and remember to subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.